President Biden visited Georgia yesterday to emphatically reaffirm his commitment to voting rights reform.
It's the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. I've been having these quiet conversations with members of Congress for the last 2 months. I'm tired of being quiet.
Biden also doubled down on doing whatever it takes to push his legislation through Congress, including changing the filibuster.
I believe that the threat to our democracy is so grave that we must find a way to pass these voting rights bills. Debate them, vote, let the majority prevail. And if that bare minimum is blocked, we have no option but to change the Senate rules, including getting rid of the filibuster for this.
As for whether the president's wishes will become reality, well, not even CNN's Gloria Borger is convinced he can do it.
Do you think he'll get this done, though? I mean,
I think it looks bleak, honestly. I just feel that right now it's a bit quixotic. He knows that it's an uphill battle. And I think he's facing an awful lot of pressure from people in the base of the party who supported him and who said to him, look, why did you waste so much energy on Build Back Better? And you lost that. You got infrastructure, you got the rescue plan, you lost Build Back Better. You should have been doing voting rights.
Borger might not be the only one doubtful of Biden. Noticeably missing from the president's speech was Georgia Democratic icon and current candidate for Georgia Senate, Stacey Abrams. Her absence has been the source of plenty of Twitter speculation. The Abrams camp blamed a scheduling snafu.
We are very lucky to have Briahna Joy Gray here to discuss this with us. She's the host of the Bad Faith podcast, which is excellent, and former national press secretary for the Bernie Sanders campaign. Welcome, Briahna.
Thank you, Emily. It's good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about, are people making too much of Stacey Abrams' absence? I mean, maybe we can just start with the politics of this and get that out of the way on the first part. Is there anything to read into Stacey Abrams' absence from the president's visit to Georgia? Is there anything there, or is this sort of just a political distraction?
Well, I don't know how much we even need to read the tea leaves about Stacey Abrams' absence when the major voting rights groups that have been behind all of the advocacy and registration efforts in Georgia that won the state have been very clear about their displeasure with Joe Biden and their wish that he had stayed in D.C. and continued to put pressure on members of Congress instead of going down south to do what many are seeing as a largely performative stunt. He referenced in the clip of the speech you heard right there all of these months and months of private conversations. Yet when he finally took to the podium to have a conversation about what he was going to do to press the issue and secure voting rights, he ultimately just obliquely referenced those conversations instead of calling out those who are impediments to passing voting legislation, which in times past has been so uniformly accepted across the aisle that even Joe Biden's very good friend, racist segregationist Strom Thurmond, as he mentioned him in the speech, even his racist friend Strom Thurmond had voted for it, right? So that's what we know, we know clearly that voting rights advocates are frustrated with Joe Biden, regardless of what Stacey Abrams herself believes.
Performative is such a good word for what that was.
It's a lot of civil rights groups, like you said, and Akela Lacey reported that at The Intercept didn't show up for this yesterday. And yesterday, Senator Joe Manchin again declined to give Biden his support on killing the filibuster.
You plan on watching and listening to what the president says today?
Oh, I'd love to. If I'm not in committee meetings, I will be. Yeah.
Anything he can say to change your mind on filibuster and procedure?
Filibuster is what we have, our rules. We need some good rule changes to make the place work better, but getting rid of the filibuster doesn't make it work better.
Do you get any pressure from your constituents back home on that issue?
Well, no, I mean, what they know about the filibuster is basically what Bob Byrd has educated people on over the years. And the filibuster is what makes the Senate hopefully work when it's supposed to work. We need some good rules changes, and we can do that together. But you change your rules with 2/3 of the people that are present. So it's Democrats and Republicans changing the rules to make the place work better. Getting rid of the filibuster does not make it work better.
So Manchin's open to changing the rules around the filibuster, but only if he can get 17 Republicans to join in. But as Politico's Burgess Everett and Marianne Levine write, it's not just Joe Manchin standing in Biden's way. Mark Kelly is undecided. John Tester likes a talking filibuster, but is, quote, not crazy about making an exception for elections reform. And Jeanne Shaheen is promoting more modest changes. Briahna, today, Manchin is sitting down with 9 Senate Democrats who are going to, again, try to make the case to him that there needs to be an exception in the filibuster for voting rights, and that it needs to be done with 50 votes because there are not 17 Republicans. I think we can go out on a limb and say that that's the case.
I can confirm.
You can confirm that? Oh, excellent. Okay, we have that confirmed. This is just in.
Yeah.
There are not 17 Republicans willing to change the filibuster rules in order to allow Democrats to pass their voting rights bill. So they're going to put it on the floor anyway. What next?
Well, first, I just got to say, I love the journalism that was displayed in that clip. Imagine if that journalist had actually asked, what are the reforms you would like to see happen? Or instead of offering him out of, are people in your constituents actually okay with the filibuster as it stands? Point to polls, studies, anecdotal evidence, newspaper reports, journalism from West Virginia, which shows that people are very unhappy with the state of play in one of the poorest states in the union. And we're extremely enthusiastic about many aspects of the Build Back Better bill and other legislation that is not going to pass as long as there is no filibuster reform. But the crisis of journalism aside, at the end of the day, behind closed doors, all of these figures should be making asks. Or alternatively, they have no substantive interest in changing any of the rules that Manchin referenced over and over again. All the rules, we like the rules, we like the rules. Well, the reason why all of these elected officials like the rules is exactly this. It provides cover for their inaction and cover for the fact that we, in fact, live in a one-party state where there is a plutocracy that controls everything. And so the Republicans don't need to do this song and dance, right? There's an alignment between their stated objections and their kind of political ideals that doesn't require them to jump through the hoops the Democrats do. The Democrats have to pretend to want nice things. The Democrats have to pretend to care about minority rights and all of these diffuse interests that are required for them to cobble together their coalition. But at the end of the day, the people who fund the Democratic Party are very much not interested in passing any of these agendas. And the fact that Joe Biden is a lame duck, frankly, is very useful for a Democratic Party that has these obligations to its corporate base.
Yeah, and it's interesting that all of this is coming down to Joe Manchin, speaking of plutocracy, as somebody who benefits from that system immensely, and the route to persuasion for him would be to show him that he doesn't benefit from the system, and that's obviously not possible because he seems to think it benefits him, and he seems to think his constituents are benefiting from it too. Briahna, that's my last question is, what do you think, if there is any route to persuading a Joe Manchin or a Kyrsten Sinema on this, what do you think that is? What is the most persuadable argument that Joe Manchin should hear about reform on this issue?
I would love to see Joe Biden, a senior Democrat, say, this is a list of things I'm willing to give Joe Manchin. I've asked him repeatedly what his clear demands are and have told him he basically has a blank check. He has refused to act regardless of how much that blank check could benefit the people of West Virginia. I would like to see those remarks being given in West Virginia or Arizona, and for that to be a tipping point for him to say, consequently, this man is completely untethered from any checks and balances in democracy, and he needs to be challenged. He needs to be primaried. Now, we know that's not going to happen because, again, I think there's an identity of interest between Joe Biden and Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and the 10 or 12 other people in the Democratic Party who would fill in as the rotating villain if, for some reason, the Manchin-Sinema chip ever fell. But it would serve the purpose if Joe Biden were a good faith actor. It would serve the purpose of revealing to the American people the extent to which this "aw shucks, man, I don't know" routine that people like Joe Manchin do, and this like I'm a nice guy, like I'm doing my best. There's just these rules, and rules are good, and we like rules, right, guys? All of that stuff would be revealed as the hoax that it is, and that is true for Joe Biden, who also plays that game.
Yeah, and how concerned do you think Biden is of Manchin leaving? Like, 'cause if Manchin leaves the party and Republicans offer him the gavel, he can stay chairman of the Energy Committee, then Biden can no longer get his executive appointments, his judicial appointments through. How much do you think that's actually driving Biden's posture toward Manchin?
Significantly. And we had, I interviewed Ro Khanna on Bad Faith podcast a couple of months ago, and I asked him that question very squarely. And he denied, waved away pretty cavalierly that as a concern. But I think it's obvious that that is the threat. In fact, during that interview, Ro Khanna indicated that it was Kyrsten Sinema. This was, before the collapse of Build Back Better. He indicated that it was Kyrsten Sinema that was going to be the real holdup and the real problem, and that Joe Manchin was really, a good guy who was operating on a logical basis and could be negotiated with, et cetera. And the way things have played out, it seems to indicate to me that there was some effort to cover up the fact that Joe Biden had the party in a vice grip, as it were. And they need to figure out how to handle that. If Joe Manchin is in fact threatening, after the Democratic Party used judicial appointments and the Supreme Court in particular as such a bully pulpit during election season, if a so-called Democrat is indeed threatening the legislative future, the civil rights that are upheld by the Supreme Court because of his own personal caprice, and in the face of a willingness of a Democratic Party who's willing to give him almost anything, personal or for his constituents in the state of West Virginia. If that is really the state of play, someone needs to call him out on that, because honestly, that hanging threat isn't serving our democracy, the people of West Virginia, or anybody in America.
Briahna, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you both.
And we'll have more Rising right after this.